So professional responsibilities, this was an interesting set of debates for our group. They wanted to change a lot of our professional responsibilities to focus specifically on Black and Brown students, which I will note that none of us actually in principle believe is a bad thing, but as particularly for classroom faculty, because that's where the sort of first set of recommendations or whatever you want to call proposals we got, really fundamentally changed the fact that we're teachers, and when we teach all students, and we understand that from a learning perspective, we have to already adapt our methodology to meet the diverse students in our class, whether that's race, accessibility, etc. And so we pushed back against what we felt were a number, kind of a really broad overreach across the board to redesign our professional responsibilities. That said, we did agree to some what we believe are relatively small changes, and you can see this in the red line copy, but I just gave a couple examples. So number one, provides evidence that the dignity of the individual is respected, is now says interacts with students and colleagues across employee groups with dignity and respect. Another example, provides for each student a current course syllabus consistent with the approved outline that was before. Now the updated version actually puts a timeline on it. Provides a copy to the appropriate administrator by the end of the second week of the term for 16-week classes and the end of first week for 8-week classes. What evidently the interest here, although the greater majority of our faculty actually turn in their syllabi right away, evidently there are those one or two that don't turn it in until week 15. So it puts a specific timeline on it that's pretty consistent with what I think most of us have been doing. I think the other one was things that were done in a timely manner. I think we changed that to starts and ends class on time, something like that, right, James?
Yeah, I think it was that particular one was I think was similar to starts the class on time, something along those lines, and they wanted to add ends, and we were okay with that. So just minor changes. I mean, they really were trying to plug in not only equity, very focused equity work into the criteria, but also accessibility responsibilities to faculty and things that just where the infrastructure is just not yet there. So that was kind of our major pushback is we're interested in all these areas. We agree with you that we need to continue the positive movement in all these areas, but in the performance review isn't the space to onboard people, especially when we're just barely starting to build out that infrastructure as a district. That was a real concern of ours that, you know, in future, this could be revisited again, but there's no there yet to actually begin to possibly really go after faculty for responsibilities where there's no one to help and not enough hours in the day to meet the changes to the standards that they were trying to push.
Yeah, and I think one example we would give with accessibility is for those of us who teach face-to-face classes, if we have a student who needs accommodations, we can most of the time we will get instruction from DSPS, or we can send them to the DSPS office for proctoring, etc. In the online environment, there's at least the initial information we're getting has said that the initial says that we have to make everything accessible whether or not someone has a need, but also there's all sorts of different standards online, and that's one of those kind of moving targets that the accessibility committee is working through. And so what we were afraid of is that in changing the professional obligations, we could be looking at an untold amount of workload creep, particularly given the online environment around things like accessibility. So we were really careful not to negotiate in things that would lead to potential workload creep in areas that we were unclear about. Special review, this actually just is a slight revision. Before it said where it says joint meeting, it was a separate meeting. In practice, all the presidents who had to sit in on a special review, they acknowledged that it was a joint meeting. So this is just a little cleanup work. So we have we signed an MOU right before the Supreme Court of the United States decision related to DACA. We signed in probably the first protections in the state in collective bargaining to help our faculty members, not just DACA related, not just DACA related, but immigration related, because there were so many changes happening to naturalization processes, H-1B visas, et cetera, that were impacting all of our faculty. This first one basically redefines personal necessity leave and allows an individual to take personal necessity leave to tend to immigration or citizenship status matters. This would basically, if you look at the contract, personal necessity leave is very sort of tightly written in terms of what you can use it for. We'll have a couple of other things a little bit later. This was one of the things that we did relative to family leave. We looked at the bereavement leave policy, and it changes the in-state, out-of-state designation to a 300-mile radius from the district office. We did this because I think most of us know that, you know, if you have to leave for the reason of because of bereavement, you actually got more time, 5 days, if you had to go to Reno, and you only got 3 days if you had to go to Los Angeles. So we just, this is also consistent with other bargaining units who had a mild designation and not in-state, out-of-state. They wanted sunset language on this, I guess, to see how it affects them. I'm not quite sure why. Do you remember, Jason, do we remember why they wanted pilot language on this? I guess just in case.
They were afraid of cost. They're not sure where most people travel to for bereavement.
So yeah, that's why we'll integrate into the contract if there's no contingencies that have us roll it back. Oops, sorry. Unpaid leave under Article 10. This is clarification. We had to clarify language at the front of Article 10. It basically made it sound like that only full-time faculty were eligible for unpaid leaves. In fact, we have a couple of things, both in terms of immigration and military, that do pertain to part-timers. But I think in terms of the immigration pieces here, for full-time faculty members who may be granted full-time faculty members may be granted a leave without pay because they or an immediate family member are subject to an immigration action that impacts their stay in the United States. In other words, they or someone else was deported or had to leave the country because of the cancellation of a visa. Upon their return, they'll be assigned to the same college, department, and position held prior to taking the leave, except in extraordinary circumstances, including those identified in 10.12. Sorry. They will also hold on to their tenure. They also hold on to their tenure as well. Adjunct faculty members who are subject to immigration actions that impact their stay in the U.S. will remain in the hiring pool of the college and department where they were previously employed as adjunct faculty. Adjunct faculty members who are subject to an immigration action shall retain their preference, class, and step placement and years of service upon return. So basically, these are just a couple things that we can do that allow folks to be able to take care of their immigration status in the event of deportation. So here's another one that some folks will either love or hate. This is Article 11 that we've added to professional expectations. This is the mandatory minimum use of Canvas, or actually the LMS system. I put Canvas in there, I believe, because that's what we're on right now. But all instructional faculty must have the following level of minimum usage of the mutually approved learning management system, which for right now is Canvas, for all classes, irrespective of modality, except in instances where the use of the LMS is prohibited. So for example, our prison education and reentry program, they have a lot of technological restrictions. So this is already, in terms of MOU, this was already what we were doing this semester. We are making this now permanent. Faculty must do the following 4 things in the LMS. 1, provide instructor contact information. 2, include a course syllabus. 3rd, publish the learning management system / course shell. And 4, require students to visit the LMS. And in the event that there is an emergency closure as declared by the Board of Trustees, faculty will create an announcement or email or page that informs students of what to expect from the course during the period of remote operations. So if that means that you're going to be putting up 3 assignments and they need to finish it, great. If that means that you're going to do a synchronous lecture, then you're expected to announce it. But this is basically a mandatory minimum use of the system. We made the decision, we made this particular decision based off of data we got from the most recent survey that indicated that about 89% of our faculty who finished the survey, who completed the survey, said that they would be okay with this.
Right.
Yeah. So if we have an agreement that we have to include our syllabus in a Canvas shell that's published, and we have an agreement that we have to provide a copy of our syllabus to the appropriate administrator, therefore, isn't it reasonable for us to ask them to do the work of putting our syllabi inside our Canvas shells and publishing them?
So someone else had brought that up, but then that would mean that you have to give access to that administrator. And I'm laughing because it was Gabrielle who's on this call. But then that means giving the administrators carte blanche access to your Canvas shell, which is our problem, is not wanting them to necessarily be in your shell or having the opportunity to access it without your permission, because that's a double-edged sword there, particularly in terms of some of the behaviors I've seen in other departments that we've had to grieve. So, but I see where you're going with that, and you're not the only one who's made that argument.
I think that there's an argument that's connected to, they already have access to our Canvas shells because they create them and they put students in them and they put us in them. And it's not that hard from a conceptual process. It's just a matter of time for programming to have a lot of that automated. So just thought I would share that idea again. So thank you.
Of course, that sort of freaks me out just a little bit, Greg, to know that they could do that, but but I get where you're going with that. So
I just had one question on that point, the last point. It requires students to visit their course. How is that going to be tracked if the person isn't using if a person is not using Canvas for their course?
So what we're gonna suggest that folks do is just do like and most of us we can show you how to set some of this up. We were thinking about maybe doing a training video, but just have a required like 2-point quiz that says visit, what are 3 things that you saw on my homepage on Canvas or whatever, something that shows that they accessed it. As long as you have an assignment somewhere that says that they have to visit it, it's not our fault if the students don't do it. So it's just a matter of you yourself showing that you've asked them to do that, whether that's
right. I guess I'm just thinking for faculty, like adjunct faculty or faculty in courses that don't regularly use Canvas. And I know that's few and far between, but they would then have to create something like you're saying to have the students use Canvas.
Yeah, and I think what we can do, and this is sort of the training stuff that we're going to have to on-ramp people into some of these new requirements, is we're thinking, one of the things I was thinking of is just kind of creating a couple of examples of how you could do this. This could just literally be you could send them a link that they have to click on. But, and like I said, it could just literally be an email that says, here, please click on this site and log in. And so you're covered via an email that you've sent, to all of your students via the roster. And so if the students don't click on it, it's not your fault, but you've required them to do it because you said, look, I'm going to check and see who logged in and give everyone a point, whatever it is. Or I'm going to check it on this date to make sure you've accessed it.
Or I mean, Canvas can track if students access it. So
yeah, we could just go on the people page and see when they logged in. Yeah. So I always remind my students that Canvas is Big Brother. And that I actually show my students the page that shows how long you've been on it, how many clicks you've done. Yeah. It shows me how many late assignments, and they all get a little freaked out. And but yeah.
Can I ask a question about that? This is a question that I'm in a good place to answer because I'm not a full-time DE coordinator, and I have union leadership in the room with me, and that is, at each of our campuses we have a default Canvas course that gets populated, right? Every course that's there. Would it be, and I don't need an answer right now, but I'm going to propose this question. If you have a quick answer, great. Would it be okay if the DE coordinators who manage those default Canvas shells put in an activity that could be used to meet this requirement? So that way, all the faculty have to do is just publish the activity within the course.
Personally, I think that's awesome. I'm going to, maybe folks in the box, if you would like something like that for the DE coordinators to create like a generic activity, would that be something you found helpful? Maybe just putting that in the box. I think the more automated, the better. Personally on this particular one, so that we could then create a video that says, and this is what you need to do.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Is there any more questions on this? And I realize I'm running a little bit behind, but. In terms of type C leave, before you used to have to run through the campus process in order to be approved for type C leave to use your accrued type C leave for the purpose of paternity and maternity leave. I do want to note that we tried to change the name of this to parental leave, and evidently there's all sorts of other policies there that we're going to have to work on renaming. So right now it's still paternity and maternity leave, faculty who want to use their accrued type C leave to supplement paternity and maternity leave no longer needs approval via the campus application process. So basically this allows you to use your leave that you've already accrued there. I do want to note that one of our continuation MOUs is to continue discussions on family leave as well. In terms of participatory governance, so for the last 2 decades, we've actually had, or close to 2 decades, we've had a standing committee called the Steering Committee, in which the Steering Committee is an ad hoc committee of the LRCCD and the LRCFT, where the function of the group is to consult on matters related to the collective bargaining agreement, and to also have just sort of general discussions of things that relate to faculty workload, kind of very similar to the leadership meetings that Senate has as well. But although we've referred to it in a couple of places in the contract, it actually did not exist in writing, so we are simply adding in what was already there.
We have a question from Orny.
Yep.
Thank you. So Belinda, for type C leave, you're saying that faculty don't have to get their dean's approval and the college president's approval. Is that what you're saying? They send it directly to the district?
Only for the purposes of paternity and maternity leave. They may still have to run it through their dean, but they don't have to be approved at the campus level anymore. Before, it was sort of at the discretion of the campus of whether or not they could take it. Now, for paternity and maternity leave, it basically is an automatic approval of the usage of your accrued leave.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. The non-discrimination clause is again related to immigration. Amends the list of protected groups to include immigration and citizenship status. What's ironic is that 3 years ago, we tried to put the same language in, and it was summarily rebuffed by JP Sherry and their team. So 3 years later, here we are. Federation rights, we had to do, this was a lot of revisions. Number one, we were updating Article 1.1 so that we actually could, the Federation can actually email members. The district will provide safety information and consult with the Federation regarding any proposed emergency actions that may or may not require temporary closure of district facilities. We deleted Article 19.5 to come into compliance with the Supreme Court decision, Janus versus AFSCME, and which basically doesn't allow agency fee payers, and then makes available to faculty a digital copy of the contract via a link on the Human Resources website and 100 print copies instead of, I think it was 200. In terms of work environment and safety, we had a couple of safety provisions here. We basically said the faculty working extended hours should be provided with appropriate information regarding campus supervision during those hours in case it's an emergency. That there should also be emergency preparedness plans and training provided by the district. We also amended the existing article so that we have LRCFT representation on the district safety committee. One is a LRCFT appointee, and the second one is a faculty member from career education, because they work at a lot of the centers that have a lot of sort of specialized needs that are important. And that it's important to note that these committees may meet off contract. What's important for Article 27, it's a complete and total revise. In March 2016, LRCFT filed an unfair practice charge against the district because they, in our opinion, they were failing to provide us adequate information on investigations in order, particularly her discrimination complaints, in order to defend our members. And so we basically revised all of Article 27. It is a settlement. LRCFT won across the board at every level. They had appealed this multiple times, I think 4, if not 5 times, and they finally agreed to settle it. And the settlement clearly identifies information regarding process and timeline in the information that's provided to us. Article 28, I think that this is extremely important. We've had a number of questions across the colleges on this. It affirms that all content created by faculty for online teaching and the LMS is the faculty member's intellectual property. In other words, you own it, whether it is what you do for OEI, what you do for your own classes, it is yours. Second, because this has come up in a few places, the LRCCD cannot download content without permission, nor can they compel a faculty member to provide the content of a class or course shell to deans or other faculty members. Unfortunately, this came up in a few places where they downloaded, they tried to download the entire class and give it to someone else. Are there any questions? I'm speeding through things.
Yes, on that, I had a fellow faculty member that gave a Zoom lecture and was contacted by the dean later on about the lecture, about possible meeting with the students in the parking lot or something. But that was information only in a Zoom meeting. So that just means that the deans or the administrators already have access to all the Zoom meetings of everybody. Is that correct?
They shouldn't. Who's your college? Which college are you at?
SME, Science, Math, and Engineering.
Oh, you're at SEC. So can you do me a favor and just email me a very kind of analysis, or Annette Barfield, either one of us, kind of very specific discussion of what happened there, because they should not, it depends on whether it was a student, if that can be a student complaint. It may not be that they had access. It could be that a student said, faculty member did A, B, and C, and they're repeating something. But if they viewed something, then we actually have to monitor that.
Well, no, the instructor just brought up a possible meeting with students, like for office hours or something, off campus that would be safe for them. But then the dean came in from that Zoom meeting and said, no, you shouldn't do that. Mm. Yeah, so it wasn't a student-initiated occurrence.
Were they under review?
No.
So do me a favor and just shoot me and Annette Barfield an email, and then we can follow up on that, because the dean should not have been just there. But I would also argue that the dean is correct that we cannot take any face-to-face meetings right now. That's actually consistent with this district practice in general.
Okay. Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely email Annette and I. So ongoing negotiations, MOU number one is mandatory equity training work group. The LRCFT and LRCCD, in partnership with Academic Senates, will explore the possibility of creating mandatory equity training programs for all faculty to participate in. The group will be charged with examining logistics, applicability across the district, mechanisms for identifying trainings that fulfill requirements, and the number of work hours that would be either carved out of college service or compensated. What's important to note here is that it may be that when students go through their process, that they realize that this is just not doable. And if it's not doable, we're not going to move forward with it. We know that the district has a very strong interest in wanting to push this through, but we also feel that equity training should not be one of those compliance issues where people take the same training over and over again. We also know, for example, that the small colleges especially do not have enough full-time faculty right now to fulfill all of the service that they need done in terms of participatory governance. So the first numbers that we saw from the districts could really have been detrimental in terms of participatory governance at the local level, because it would require so many hours. So these are some of the logistics we have to work on, and a more robust way of identifying potential trainings. Second, it already exists in Article 26 of the contract, but we're going to convene the Joint Committee on the Impact of Technology. The distance education piece had a number of things that we felt we couldn't move forward on because there was a lot of gray area. We're unsure where the district is going with Los Rios Online. They have one committee there that was supposed to meet 5 times this semester, has only met twice. We also have an accessibility committee that is ongoing about accessibility in the DE environment. Not just DE, but everywhere, but has a big impact on DE. So we were not comfortable negotiating changes to the contract without understanding some of the more concrete aspects of it. So the scope of work for this particular group is going to include revising Article 26, It's going to look at an online assignment for instructional and non-instructional faculty. I think what I want to note here is that while the district wants us to consider classroom faculty being able to teach 100% online, for us, before we even go there, we would like some parity for our non-instructional faculty colleagues, librarians, nurses, counselors, etc. Because in past negotiations, they've tried to make the argument that those categories just cannot do the work online. Well, COVID has shown us that they absolutely can do the job online. And in fact, when it comes to counseling, we've actually arguably seen that there are less cancellations because students just have to either call in or get on Zoom. We will be looking at accessibility issues, online workload, data protections, which I think are really important with all of these programs being integrated with Canvas. And we will also be looking at sort of wraparound service issues. So we will be continuing that work in spring 2021 across the board. So, and then finally, we're continuation of negotiations on family leave issues. We've agreed to continue negotiations on issues related to family leave between December 1st and April 1st, December 1st of this year and April 1st of next year within the steering committee. We presented them, I think, with 9 or 10 different tentative agreements. They did not get through vetting all of them, and so we are continuing that work as well. They've also agreed to improve the presentation of existing family leave policies, including information available to employees. And the LRCCD has agreed to evaluate its family leave information and materials. So those are the sort of 3 areas for continuation of negotiations. So again, I want to reiterate that, I want to reiterate that we have a living contract, which means that we have the ability to negotiate things in between cycles. So for example, if we realize that we actually, because of our more kind of conservative approach to budget, end up with more ongoing dollars, right? And that we can infuse the salary schedule, we will negotiate that between contracts. We use a bucket system, so we are already in. We are guaranteed about, I think it's about 62% of the dollars that come into the district goes into our bucket, give or take. And so for us, the fight is not necessarily about the money as opposed to how to use the money. And we are definitely monitoring that situation very closely. But we also know that we also may need to make decisions around, if we have some extra ongoing dollars, from a tax perspective, is it better to offset the increase to medical benefits, right? Because we may be looking at anywhere from 4 to 8% increase. Is that what it was this morning, Jason, what they were telling us?
Yeah, 5 to 8.
Yeah, 5 to 8. We may be looking at 5 to 8% if you want to keep your services the same. They're looking for some other options that will potentially be no cost, but different, but it may mean scaling back the services you're eligible for. But all of those things are things that we have to evaluate, and we're committed to communicating that forward. So, so for us, a lot of it are those pieces, and we may also want to put in what we call trigger language for a number of money related options, that if we have this much ongoing, it's going to be allocated in this way. So I'm going to stop there. I know I'm 8 minutes over the 2:30 piece, but
there's a question in the chat with regard to a question about the appendices about the equity statement or equity reflection.
Oh yeah. So what's the questions on Appendix E1, John?
Yeah, I'm wondering exactly what will satisfy training when people go in to write that reflection. Exactly what sort of activities would satisfy the equity piece of the PRT?
So there will be a few different options. I think one, first and foremost, all of the colleges have institutes or flex activities related to equity, right? And it can be a number of things about how to read your data. For example, SCC is running one on November 18th on equity mindedness in STEM. Right, so it can be any of those flex obligations that are run at any of the campuses. We've also advocated for, so for example, I'm going to use James's librarian example. That for librarians, it may be that at their national or their statewide conference, that there are particular workshops related to those topics that our goal would also be to submit those in advance to be able to be okayed as part of that work. But I think that we left it purposely open so that on the equity reflection that you can, that if you look at the definition of equity mindedness, which we're happy to, maybe we should link that into I'll link that into a frequently asked question on our side of it. It would be things that align with that definition of equity and equity mindedness that, you know, and that the sources may come from different areas for different folks. So I don't necessarily expect that us at home will have something that we can offer the librarians, but maybe through the ALA or, you know, whatever, one of their organizations could do so. Same thing with historians, et cetera. So we didn't want it to be limited to just Los Rios. We wanted to provide kind of a greater opportunity for you to be able to draw from your own sources. And if you have questions, you could probably also chat with some of the different equity coordinators at the campus. Orny?
Yeah, John. So I think the CTL activities, you know, there are a lot of them. A lot of those would qualify as well.
I think the other thing I want to encourage folks to do is also that the way that our flex system works is that you could take workshops at any of the 4 campuses. So I know Sarah lives relatively close to Sacramento City College, but works at ARC, but maybe she sees something that she wants to take at SEC. She can totally do that. Sorry, I see you on my screen, so I'm just going to use you as an example, Sarah. So, you know, things like that. But granted, we're now in a virtual world, so distance doesn't really matter as much. But when we're back face-to-face, I also want to encourage folks that all of the 4 campuses are in very different places. And so I think that the more that we can also push, and I think this is a Senate and union thing, the more that we can push greater sort of integration of these things across the board, the better. Other questions, concerns? We're kind of now in the hangout session anyways, so.
I have a quick question. So negotiations over family leave are going to be ongoing in the spring semester with a deadline of April 1st for wrapping up those negotiations. Does that mean that whatever agreement the union comes to with management, that that agreement has to be basically, it needs to go before the membership for a vote before the April 1st deadline, or is April 1st the deadline for just negotiations? And
we would integrate that via MOU, so it probably wouldn't actually need a membership vote at that point. It wouldn't go if it got integrated into the contract, then you would need the membership vote. So basically, we would sign anything.
I didn't realize that about MOUs.
We deliver, or I should say, I shouldn't use the we. I deliberately asked for a timeline on that because I wanted it to be very clear that this was an urgent issue for the union and that it should be one for the district as well. Without going into particulars, I think Jason was there, but both of us felt, and so was Robert, but all 3 of us feel very strongly that we were unwilling to wait on their timeline.
Yeah, we actually told them that we would extend negotiations if they didn't agree to some movement at this time.
Yeah, because oftentimes we get caught in a lot of yes/no stuff versus like actually like following IBA, which is a discussion, and we were unhappy that there wasn't, in our opinion, a more robust discussion. And so we're compelling that discussion now by putting a deadline on it. And we have a couple other extraneous issues, like we have another one with theater arts that is sort of floating out there that we're trying to put on a particular timeline as well. So there are some things that we know are kind of longer conversations. There are some that we very specifically put on a timeline to keep us on track. Sorry, John, did I answer all your questions about all the equity reflection? Was it just that one piece? Or Terry, Rory, anyone else have questions? Tracy? Cool. Well, I guess we could stop recording now, James, so it just doesn't go on forever.